In today's video, I want to cover your bore stroke combinations and how it affects the saw. Okay, I want to cover ignition time and advances or retards, depending on what you've done with the saw. I want to talk about. Let's just see how much time we got. There's much I want to talk about. I'm going to make probably over the next 6 months, probably 20 or 30 videos only on the topic of how do we do this math. Some of the math that I use, I'm not going to try to explain to you because it isn't entry level anymore. It gets a little bit too hairy. So I'm going to make conversions like trying to calculate your compression ratio, static, that means sitting still, and also your dynamic compression ratio as the motor's turning, as it's running, uh, how that affects performance of your saw. This can be easily done in another video on just, okay, let's do a compression test. Let's figure this back on what it does. I'm going to build a chart so that you can see if you got 140 pounds, 150, 160, all the way to whatever, sky's the limit, what that compression ratio, the measured compression when you're rolling this motor over affects your static compression and your running compression. Let's just call it what it is. And how does that affect performance of the saw? What RPMs? And all it's just a way big thing that I can't do in one video. So let me try to jump right in this. The first thing you really should learn to get a good foundation is we need to learn how to measure our CCs of our saw, because we get into altering these. We do big bores. Okay, how does that affect what are we really trying to calculate? How do we take parts that are never designed to fit in these saws, which I'll cover them one by one as I run into them? How do we get these saws at a whole nother level? I need to start making these videos amongst my saw builds so that by this fall, when we're doing some of this, the really fun saws, um, you already know where we're headed with this. You already can see it. And this is not for everybody. These videos are going to be boring to some people. I know that. I don't care. I know how to make videos by having the right title, right screenshot, right content, so I get massive views. I'm doing this for you guys. I don't care if there's 5 of you out there in the world that want to know this stuff. I'm doing it for you. I've always been about what have I learned down this path. No, I don't have all the answers. But the major builders that do the same thing that I do, not in style or port work, but in how they have to have relevant information, right? Well, let's jump right into this. I've got a project I want to talk to you about. Um, Thanks to Lumber Jackson, we're getting a 395, and we're going to build this 395 for Buck and Billy. I'm going to show you the possibilities on the 394, 395 saws. And so when we get to building that, you see right where we're headed. So I might just well jump right into this, shouldn't I? Okay, this is your formula. If you're not sure of your bore stroke combinations, Google it. You'll see what different saws bore stroke combinations are. There's some really good ones out there, and I think Arborist.com is one of them that I use to know what my bore stroke is, so that when I see a cylinder or something that's different than that, I can recalculate and know exactly where I'm headed with this. Okay, by cc's, cubic centimeters. Okay. So let's talk about the 394, 395. Okay, 394 has a 38 millimeter stroke. It has a 56 millimeter bore. So let's go with 38. Okay, I'm just going to put stroke. Didn't get the R in there, but you got it. Okay. And 56 bore. Okay. That's 395. 394 is the same. So, boy, I got terrible writing on this. I can't read my own writing anyway. We don't need to do that. Okay, so what we're going to do is calculate. So punch in your calculator, 0.785, okay, times bore. So that means 7.85 times 56 times 56 times 38. That's the stroke. You will get 93.54 if you did it right. Don't forget to divide by 1,000. You don't have to. I just move your decimal point over, okay? That's a big saw. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you something pretty cool. Okay, so what we're going to do fun about this, and some of you may know this or you don't know it, but we'll cover it if I think this is the direction I'd really like to go, because by doing the math first and be able to recalculate this stuff and then see it in action before and after would be really, really good. Okay, same 394. Let's increase the stroke to 40. Okay, 40 millimeters. You know how we do that? With a 2100 crankshaft. All right? Now, we'll keep it 56 millimeter bore. Okay, so you do your 0.785 times 56 times 56 times 40 millimeters. You end up with 98.47. Okay, that's our CCs. We have 98.47 CCs by using a 2100 crank and a 394 or 395. Okay, let's call that, okay, you gain 5 CCs. You'll notice, even in the 70cc class saws, you gain nearly that same when you start figuring out different cranks that fit, which so far, I know what does and doesn't work without really badass machining, and I don't want to get into that with you guys. At this point, let's save this for this winter. You know, for those of you that's got machine shop knowledge or have machine shops that want to say, hey, I want to really play. And it's really fun, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to warn you, some of this stuff doesn't make the most huge gains all by itself that you think it would. Okay, we don't have to stop right there with this number, 98.47. That is a substantial gain. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take that same 394, and we're going to put the 40 millimeter in it, 2100 crank. We're going to go to 58 millimeters. Yes, they make a big bore for it. Highway does. I think maybe you might find it with other companies too, but I use a lot of Highway. So, calculate your 0.785 times your bore, which is 58, times your bore again, which is 58, times your stroke, which is 40. Okay? This is where it starts getting fun. You get 105.62. Okay? That's CC. Okay. Now, that's a saw worth talking about, isn't it? Once you've reached that, this saw gets real. Okay, now all of a sudden we have complicated things greatly. Okay? We really, really have. So what we need to understand is I've just made this great big CC saw, and this is going to be a ball of fire. Okay, now we got to figure out how to keep the saw alive, okay? Because we have just really changed a whole lot. We really have. We've changed our compression ratio because of the increased bore. We have a longer stroke, means a lot more torque available. How do we port saws like that? Well, when we get into porting that, I'll cover it. How do you port these saws just like this? I'll warn you, you're going to have enough static compression with a flat top piston by doing the longer stroke and longer bore. Bore diameter affects the compression. The stroke doesn't do so much necessarily. And that's what we're going to cover next. Well, I promised I'd learn to draw, but I haven't yet. So, let me show you simply the effect, okay? So all I'm going to do is make a simple line here, representing a cylinder. Do the same thing over here. Okay? This one is going to be 56. That's that cross section right there, side to side. Okay, that's 56 millimeters wide. The next one is bigger. It's 58. Okay. Here's what you've just done. You have just increased your cross-sectional area. Okay. Right here by 2 millimeters. That means more volume. Now let me show you why stroke doesn't affect it. Let me show you where that it's actually built at. So I'm going to do this to both of them. Okay. This is our exhaust right here. This is our intake. Exhaust, intake. As your piston hits this area right here on both saws, from this point to the top of the cylinder, right here, that is where your compression starts. Okay? You have, those of you that care, know how to do the math, you can do it. You can figure from what your opening is of your exhaust. This is actually on the way up, okay? You can calculate how many cc's, the volume that is right there of air. Don't worry about your cylinder, your combustion chamber at this point. Just realize that by altering this cross-section, you have much more air being compressed here than here in this given distance to the top. Okay, you have much more. Okay, you have a natural increase in your compression when you go to the big bores. Okay, here's what that allows you to do. Let's say that I am willing to go to 100 degrees on this one. Okay, this is when the piston's coming down. You know, first ray of light. 100 degrees after top dead center, we have an opening. Okay. It would allow me on a big saw to have the same amount of compression here. It would let me go to, let's say, 97 to 98. Okay. Oh. Why did I rate 80? I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, that's degrees. Okay, so when I went to the big bore, I naturally am going to assume that I can use one of these numbers, have the same compression in the big bore as I have at 100. Okay, this is what it lets you do. That's what's really neat. I mean, that's cool, ain't it? Okay, now let's complicate this. Okay, what if you had a pop-up? Okay, so we got 100. The distance, let's just call it, let's throw this number out because this is going to make it general for every saw. So you got 98 degrees and you have the same compression, right? Okay. So if we want to take this cylinder and make it have the same compression as this one at 98, we're going to do that. Okay. So we're going to change this number to 98. You can use a common compression gauge and see this in action. Do it with your 56 millimeter, do it with a 58. Use new parts on both. If you're into building a lot and you're building one series of saws like a 372 or something, this is all going to make really good sense. And you can check this. This is with a flat top piston, okay? Here's top of the piston. Now let's add 2 millimeter dome to it. Okay? What we've done, because we have a lack of volume, we have 56 millimeter, this is big, by adding a dome. I don't want to call it 2 millimeter, let's just call it whatever you want. Okay, let me get it down to you. For a 70cc saw, for every degree that you go, is about 12 thousandths, approximately. Depends on your saw. You can figure that out if you want. So let's build a 24, 25 degree dome. Okay, let's do that. Or, I mean, a 24 or 25. Yeah, I'm getting lost in my own dang thing here. Okay, 24 or 25 thousandths dome. Okay, because that should get us to that compression ratio. Okay. What's the number we're really looking at? Do you want to know what I like? I like 175. I'm way ahead of myself to 185. 4 torch saws. RPM saws, I will change this number just slightly and kill off some torque. Okay? Now, let's talk about the 272s versus the 372. You have a 2 millimeter shorter stroke in the 272. Okay? But you got a bigger bore. It's 2 millimeters. Well, you'd think that would be the same, but it's not. Okay? It's just not. And here's why. This area of compression makes a difference. Even though it's got a 2 millimeter shorter stroke, it's 2 millimeter bigger bore. Because we know that the 372 has a 50 millimeter bore. The 272 has a 52. So we have a 2 millimeter bore, but that shorter stroke, the ports are in slightly different positions to maintain, the balance on port timing. So you won't get as much compression from here to here as you do here to here between the two saws, meaning the 272 is not, you want more compression built. So keep your exhaust opening number to be a bigger number, which is it opens later to keep your compression. What's happening is when you are using a slightly shorter stroke and a bigger bore, you have to build more compression, so don't take as much off your exhaust roof because you're killing your compression all the time with this. Every degree knocks compression back. You can gain compression back in the saw, therefore it'll gain torque. The longer stroke saws have a good tendency to produce more stroke. So, shorter stroke saws produce less torque. So be aware that if your saw has a shorter stroke compared to a bore than other saws that you've run, this is an anomaly that you have to get locked into your head. It really is. my racing eraser. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit, just a tiny bit, about combustion chambers, because we're going to get into changing combustion chambers a lot. Let's do a Mac. Okay, here's your cylinder head. Let's just make it round. Okay, comes to here, and it's shaped like the bottom of an egg. Okay, your piston here. This is the top of your piston. It's firing dead in the center. The old school thought that was really, really good. Okay, but I'll tell you what they had to do. When you work on these Macs, this is your squish right here. Okay, that's your squish right in this area. They had to increase their squish, and you want to know why. Detonation, hot spots. Because you fired it in only this area in the piston, you have a hot spot in your piston. Okay, because it's a sharp edge here and here, you have hot spots right in here and here in your cylinder head, which exponentially drives more heat in this area, which it drives it more in this area, and it's a train wreck. Okay, now that makes sense, doesn't it? But you're going to see, in a lot of cases, 60 thousandths squish, okay? 40, whatever. Okay, you can increase your squish if you want to, but let's think about carbon buildup in this area here. You get a flake of carbon right here, and you get one here, and you won't get it in the center. You'll get it off the edges right in here, even in here. This is where you'll get carbon, all right? Boy, I'd hate to follow my own darn drawings, well, explanations. I'd suck at that. It looks like I'm building a freaking house for a gnome, don't it? Okay, so as the engine rotates, it comes up and it fires. Let's say the saw, and I'm just throwing a number out there, fires at 12 degrees before top dead center. You get that up to RPMs, then it's running pretty good. So let's advance our timing, because we think that if we advance our timing, that we're actually going to make this saw run better. So let's run that from 12 to 16 degrees. These are not the correct numbers. I'm just throwing them out. I will give you correct numbers, but not in this video. That means as it comes around here, it fired at 12. Okay, now as the crankshaft comes around in degree of rotation, which is like this, and this is the front of your saw, that's fired at 16. Okay, so we fired that saw early. We just made that hotter because we have an inefficiency here and here. Here's another thing that happens. When you have a combustion chamber this poor, you have these carbon pieces get glowing red, and you get pre-ignition, spark knot. And it's detonation. What it does, it fires early before it actually you wanted it to, and it cocks that piston around and makes a slap against the wall, and you'll hear it ting. All of you have probably experienced spark knock in some of the older automobiles. So you understand what it is. That's hard on a motor. It'll actually take this area in the piston and burn it right out eventually. Okay, so how do you get rid of that? Well, this is easy. First thing, up your octane. All right? Up it. Increased octane. Let's use 91 octane as a baseline non-ethanol gas. If you run an ethanol gas, you better stabilize it to get rid of the ethanol, but boy, it's a bad idea to run it. I know in some areas you can't get it. So if you up your octane, what you have is a slower fire rate, a slower burn rate, okay? More octane equals slower burn rate. Geez, I just did that right-handed. Slower burn rate dictates when that comes up, you don't get as much detonation. Okay, you don't. So let's fix a few things. Let's take this cylinder. Now we know what that shape was, so let's do this. We'll create that little dome like that, but let's break that edge again. Oh, I just got dirt bike guys' attention. It is a wider area that you're firing. You have an effective squish. Fire that right out to your squish band, okay? That will let you, if you know how, remove material from your base to get a tighter squish. 20 to 30. Okay? You have no hot spots here anymore. That rule right there does apply. But you've lowered your compression ratio because of volume, right? But you've increased it some because you have a smaller squish band. Think about that. Okay? Now here's another thing. Here's your exhaust over here. Okay? Most spark plugs are right here. They fire toward the exhaust. Something that can be done, and we will be covering this. Forget that. Why do I want to do that? Let's put a spark plug right here so it fires in all directions. See? Let's put that in the center so that fires in all directions. Now, something that's cool, and we will be doing this in the saw here this winter. You can actually throw all that away. We don't have this anymore, so forget that. We have a center spark plug right here. I can machine an insert that goes in this area. Okay? I can take all this out. I can machine it right out, or in the case of like a 372 or 394 or anything, I can build an insert that goes in the, leave the squish alone because they got pretty good squish numbers as it is. I can take this configuration that you got in the 372, the steel saw is the same, and machine an insert that goes in there like that. So I have a smaller combustion chamber if I feel like that I want to increase my ratio. Okay, so what happens is I draw that up. I have a nipple. I bore this to a larger size. It's got threads on it. That goes up into this area, which we'll put it up there right now. Okay, so all of a sudden, I've got this radius machine. So we're going to follow that radius, and I have a piece that goes in that's like this. Smaller. This is smaller area. This goes up in there. It has threads on the end, and it has a thin nut. And then your spark plug screws into that. Okay, dirt bike guys just said, well, geez, my KTM, I can get all kinds of that stuff for other bikes too. You can buy these for dirt bikes because they have center plugs. Okay, so it's not my idea, is it? But isn't it interesting where some of this goes? I know my drawing sucks, but I hope you grasp the idea of this is entry level things that are, if you want to go beyond what normal work can give you. If you want to alter your stroke, alter your bore, what's the effects? We will be covering how to port for the big bores versus stock bores, how to port for stroke changes. We're going to be covering all of this in a video. So I hope this is something you really like. I'll spin you around. I'm really glad you guys showed up for this one. If you stayed to the very end, you guys are going to get this. The ones that left in 5 minutes, well, they're not going to get it. So we have a lot more going on than meets the eye in these chainsaws. We're just trying to catch up to where dirt bikes and snowmobiles have been for years, because they already have the proper design. They already have everything. When you do a dirt bike motor or a snowmobile engine, and you implement some of these port work that we do to them, oh my goodness sakes, the changes are radical, because we don't have to correct anything like combustion chambers. We don't have to do any of that. They're already really nice. It's just so much easier. So let's bring this old technology that chainsaws use that is simple into this century. We're in the 21st century. So let's do that. These are good stuff to learn right here, I swear to God. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.